the dog everyone feared, until she sat down beside him. They told her not to go near the kennel. Not that dog, not Bran, not the one with scars along his muzzle and a warning sign twice the size of his food bowl. Children were told to keep out. Adults kept their distance too. Even the handlers spoke his name in low voices, like saying it too loud might call back a ghost. But Clara Belle wasn't like most children. She didn't see danger. She saw silence. She saw a dog who didn't lunge, didn't bark, just waited, like someone who had once known trust and now no longer believed in it. That morning, under gray skies and wind that smelled like rain, she crossed the line no one dared. What happened next didn't involve a single word, just a look, and something quietly changed forever. The sun spread gold across the estate, like it did every spring morning, soft and generous for the rich, harsher and hurried for everyone else. Above the sloping hill, the Caldwell children shrieked with delight, chasing each other across the marble terrace, their polished shoes thudding over imported stone. Their laughter echoed against the white-pillared facade of the southern mansion, like birds set loose from a cage they never knew existed. Down below, where the lawn dipped into the servants' quarter garden, Clara wiped fingerprints off the last piece of silver. Her small hands moved in circles, swift but careful. A blue cloth draped over her wrist to catch the gleam. Her fingers knew this motion well. She could polish blindfolded. And often in her mind, she did. "Don't forget the corners, love," her mother called gently from the open kitchen door. "Mrs. Caldwell says even dust has a scent poor people carry." Clara didn't respond. She was watching the children again. Taylor, blonde, loud and proud of it, tossed a leather ball into the air while Josie twirled in her frilly white dress, oblivious to the muddy hem collecting earth. Clara looked down at her own dress, a pale gray thing once white, twice stitched at the knees. The hem wasn't muddy, but that was only because she hadn't stepped far enough into anyone's world to stain it. Farther in the distance, barely visible through the trees lining the edge of the Caldwell estate, a low, rumbling bark echoed. Bran. The dog lived in a kennel behind the second greenhouse, the one nobody used anymore. Clara had only seen him once through the wire fence, his coat the color of burned oak leaves, eyes so still it felt like they were waiting to remember something long forgotten. She'd asked once why he barked only at dusk and sunrise. "He's remembering things he shouldn't," old Mr. Hank had muttered. "That's what soldiers do, sweetheart, even the four-legged ones. Bran had a history." That's all they ever said.
"Taylor." Clara hesitated. Her mother shook her head from the doorway, but only faintly, as if even disapproval couldn't be spoken too loudly in this place. Taylor was waving something shiny, a pendant, a coin, a trick. Clara shaded her eyes, heart quickening. The barks had stopped, the stillness settled in, and she knew, without knowing how she knew, that something was about to change. The garden's hush gave way to chatter and clinking glasses as the Caldwell family's afternoon gathering stretched into the heat-heavy hours of late noon. White linen tables dotted the lawn like misplaced wedding decorations, shaded beneath broad umbrellas that caught the wind like idle sails. Guests in pastel suits and floral dresses sipped lemonade with mint and talked about futures as if the world would always stay soft for them. Clara had no glass, no chair, no place. She stood at the garden's edge, holding a tray of napkins too nice to use. "Look who's still loitering," Taylor muttered to his cousin Josie, eyes gleaming with something colder than curiosity. He was 13, but already carried the entitlement of someone who'd never been told no and meant it. His tan was golden, his shoes shined. His cruelty looked like confidence. "She always stares like she wants to be us," Josie said, voice syrupy sweet with a bite underneath, like some ghost under the porch. "Let's give her a dare," Taylor whispered, grinning.
Want to see if Polisher girls got guts? They called her over with the practiced sing-song of people used to being obeyed. Clara hesitated. She saw the way they stood, not inviting but hungry. Still, she stepped forward, napkins clutched like a shield. "Do you like dogs?" Taylor asked. He'd found a stick and was twirling it between his fingers like it was a wand. Clara nodded slightly. "Even dangerous ones," Josie added, tilting her head. "She's not allowed near Bran," Clara said quietly, her voice barely rising above the breeze. "He's not like regular dogs." Taylor smirked. "Exactly why we're giving you a chance to prove you're not like regular girls." Josie clapped her hands mockingly. "Yes, a dare. Come on, Clara. You want to be brave, don't you?" The crowd nearby paid no attention. Adults were sipping wine. Mrs. Caldwell was laughing about her latest charity gala. Even Clara's mother was inside, icing lemon cakes and praying for stillness. Clara's heart thudded. She glanced toward the tree line where the wire fence shimmered faintly in the sun, the far-off corner of the estate where Bran's kennel stood like a forgotten outpost. The barking had stopped. That was somehow worse. "She's scared," Josie sneered. "Knew it." "I'm not," Clara whispered, but she was. Taylor's grin widened. "Then prove it. We'll walk you there. All you have to do is step inside and stand still. Just 1 minute, that's all." "She can't even count to 1. Josie giggled. They started walking before she could answer, her tray taken from her hands and dropped on the grass like it had never mattered. Clara's feet followed theirs as if untethered from her body. She wanted to say no, wanted to ask for someone to stop this, but her voice had learned too many times that it was better not to speak. The walk to the kennel took only 4 minutes. To Clara, it felt like crossing into another life. The main lawn gave way to gravel, then mossy stones, then brittle grass under a rusted arch, once used for vines. Beyond that, the wire enclosure, Bran's territory. He stood at the far end, head low, eyes golden beneath thick brows. Still, watching. "Go on then," Taylor said, unlatching the side gate. "You said you weren't scared." "She's not gonna do it," Josie sang. Clara looked at the dog. He didn't move, didn't growl. The wind caught her skirt, brushing it against the chain link like a flag too small to mean anything. "Just 1 minute," Taylor said again. "Unless you're a liar." The word stung. Clara stepped forward. The gate clanged shut behind her. Taylor had pushed it, then latched it. Josie squealed. "Oh my God, she's in. She's really in." Bran didn't move. He just looked at her. The air inside the kennel felt different, thicker, like a secret kept too long. Clara's breathing slowed without her meaning to. She stood near the gate, shoes on gravel, fingers curled tightly into the hem of her dress. Bran blinked, then, slowly, he stood. One paw, then another. Taylor and Josie watched wide-eyed from outside the fence, waiting for the explosion, the lunge, the growl. They wanted fear. They wanted chaos. They didn't get it. Bran didn't lunge. He approached Clara with the patience of something remembering how to be gentle. His steps made no sound, his tail didn't wag, but neither did it rise in aggression. He stopped a few feet away, eyes locked with hers, and in that stillness, something shifted. It wasn't magic. It wasn't human. It was older than that. Something primal. Quiet. Wounded. Clara felt it first in her chest. That aching recognition, as if she were looking into a mirror made of memory and fur. She didn't lift her hand, didn't speak, just breathed. And Bran, after a long pause, sat. Outside, Taylor stared in confusion. Josie stopped laughing. "She's not dead," Josie said, voice thin. "She's not even crying," Taylor muttered. Clara stood still. Bran closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. The moment passed like a breath returned. Taylor reached for the gate. "All right, enough. This is boring now." He opened it. Clara stepped out. Her legs shook, but her eyes were steady. Bran didn't follow. He watched her leave, and when the gate closed again, he turned. Caldwell called Clara and her mother into his study. "I've heard enough to know what happened," he said, fingers laced on polished oak. "That dog is not safe. But it didn't harm you. That means one of two things. Either it's pretending, or you've stirred something worth testing." His eyes narrowed. "You'll have 3 days. Prove to me that dog's not broken, or it leaves this property and never comes back. Do you understand?" Clara nodded. Outside the window, beyond the hydrangeas and moon-washed gravel, a low bark rose once and fell quiet. Bran was waiting. The world outside the kennel faded, like someone had drawn a curtain over the sun. Clara stood alone inside the rusted enclosure, her shoes half sunk in gravel, her fingers trembling near her sides, but not lifted in defense. She didn't dare move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe too deep. Because the dog, this shadow-colored sentinel with storm-glass eyes, was staring straight into her, not through her, into her. Bran hadn't lunged, hadn't barked. He had simply risen, slow and deliberate, as if pulled from some long sleep. His paws made no sound against the concrete. His body, though powerful, moved with the patience of something old, something wounded that had learned to measure every motion, every breath, for what it might cost. Clara felt a chill spread through her bones. Not fear, not quite. It was older than fear, closer to awe, as if she were standing before something sacred that the world had forgotten how to name. Bran came closer. He didn't lower his head, he didn't growl, but there was a tension in him, a question coiled tight behind the ribs, waiting. His ears twitched once. His tail remained still. His nostrils flared slightly as he took in her scent, lemon soap, dust, the faint trace of fear. Clara's legs wanted to run. Her lungs screamed to inhale. But something in her, some wordless instinct, some echo of survival, knew not to break the moment. So she stayed. And so did he. Seconds passed, or maybe hours. There was only the stillness between them, hanging like a held breath. His eyes were not cruel. They weren't even aggressive. They were searching. And something inside Clara, the part of her that had spent a childhood learning to go unnoticed, understood. Bran wasn't just watching her. He was trying to remember what trust used to feel like. Behind them, beyond the chain link, someone shouted. A door slammed. Distant footsteps scrambled toward the kennel. Clara's heart jumped. Bran didn't flinch. Instead, he sat, just like that. Hank, old, hunched, but faster than he looked, rushed forward with a bolt cutter in hand. A second later, the lock clicked open. Mrs. Caldwell screamed. Josie burst into sobs. But Bran didn't move. He simply turned his head slightly, as if to shield Clara from the chaos behind her. It wasn't aggression. It was consideration. Clara stepped through the opening. As she did, Bran rose again, not in threat, but in rhythm. His movement mirrored hers, like a shadow stretched by light. When she crossed the threshold and stood again in the fading afternoon sun, everything inside her felt changed, but she didn't know how. Only that something had passed between them, something wordless, something alive. Mr. Caldwell appeared then, still in his cream blazer, his drink forgotten, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. He said nothing at first, just looked from the girl to the dog, and then back again. "You're lucky he didn't tear your arm off," someone muttered behind him. But Clara didn't look lucky. She looked calm. Bran, now behind the fence, had returned to his corner. He lay down, paws folded, watching. Mr. Caldwell turned to the crowd. "Enough!" The whispers died. "Clear the lawn. Take the children back inside." "But she," Josie began. "Inside," he snapped. Minutes passed before the patio cleared. Clara's mother held her daughter so tight her hands trembled, but Clara's eyes never left the kennel. "Sir," Mr. Hank said cautiously, nodding toward the dog. He didn't show aggression, not even a warning posture. Mr. Caldwell glanced sideways. "No, he didn't." Clara stepped forward, voice small but steady. "He didn't hurt me." He turned toward her fully now, studied her. The housekeeper's daughter, skin freckled by sun, hair mussed from wind, too thin for her age. But in that moment, standing beneath the long afternoon shadows, she looked impossibly older than 10. "Clara," he said slowly. "You know what Bran is?" She nodded. "A police dog. Former. Was retired after incidents." His voice hardened. "You understand what it means when a dog gets retired from service for violence?" Clara didn't speak. "He attacked 2 handlers, put both in the ER, nearly lost one's hand. That dog is not a pet. He's a liability. He didn't hurt me," Clara whispered again. A long silence followed, the kind that shifts the air between people. Then Mr. Caldwell exhaled. 3 days. Clara blinked. "Sir, you've stirred something. Or maybe he's playing some kind of game I don't understand. Either way, you have 3 days. Prove to me that dog is rehabilitatable, that he can exist on this property without being a threat." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "And if I can't?" He looked at rewiring. He didn't say the rest. He didn't have to. 3 days, he repeated. Make them count. Then he turned and walked back toward the manor, shoes silent on the flagstone path, hands tucked behind his back like a man carrying history he no longer wanted. Clara stood alone again. Behind her, Bran rose. He stepped forward once, just enough that his shadow brushed hers. And in the stillness between girl and dog, something fragile had begun. Something worth saving. The kettle whistled long and sharp like a warning shot, but Clara's mother didn't move to silence it. Her hands gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white against porcelain, eyes locked on the darkening window above the dish rack. Outside, the hills were still touched by the last blush of dusk, but her mind was elsewhere, trapped behind chain link and fangs. "Tell me you're not thinking about going back," she said without turning. Clara sat at the small kitchen table, a bowl of soup cooling in front of her, untouched. Her fingers toyed with a thread unraveling from her sleeve. "He didn't hurt me," she said softly. "That's not the point. He looked at me, Mama, not like I was a threat, like he saw something, like he remembered something." Her mother spun around. "He is a police dog, Clara, a combat animal. He's been trained to take down grown men with a single bite. He didn't bite me. Because you were lucky." Her voice cracked, too loud in the cramped cottage. She caught herself, lowered her tone, and crossed the room in 2 quick steps, crouching to her daughter's eye level. "Baby, don't mistake calm for safety. You don't know what's inside that animal. You don't know what's been done to him." Clara met her eyes with a steadiness that didn't belong to a child. "Maybe he doesn't either." There was a knock on the back door, 3 short raps. Her mother stood, wiped her hands, and opened it to find Mr. Caldwell framed against the fading light, hat in one hand, a folded manila folder in the other. "Evening, Miriam," he said with a politeness too stiff to be kind. "Is Clara awake?" "I was just putting her to bed." "I won't be long." Clara's mother hesitated, then stepped aside. Mr. Caldwell ducked in, filling the space with his quiet authority. He didn't sit, just placed the folder on the table and tapped it once with 2 fingers. "Miss Bell," he addressed Clara formally, "you asked for 3 days. This is the cost of that request." Clara glanced at the folder but didn't reach for it. He opened it for her. Own handler before backup could intervene. Tendon damage, dozens of stitches, career ending. Clara swallowed. The second, he flipped the page, was worse. 2 months later, a training exercise. Officer Lyle. Bran hesitated on a command. When Lyle stepped forward to redirect him, Bran lunged, broke his wrist, fractured his collarbone. They considered euthanasia, but the department opted for a behavioral contract instead. Bran was declared unfit for duty, transferred.
"To us," Clara said, barely above a whisper.
"To be contained," Caldwell corrected, "not rehabilitated. That dog is on borrowed time, and if anything happens, anything at all on this property while he's still breathing, it won't be the police asking questions. It'll be lawyers, insurance, headlines."
He looked to her mother, then back to Clara.
"This isn't just about your curiosity or kindness. This is liability."
Clara stared at the photos. Not at the blood, but the expressions. Bran in a muzzle, Bran in a corner, Bran with his ears pressed flat, his eyes not wild, just lost. "What happened after?" she asked. Mr. Caldwell raised a brow. "After the attacks, was he scared? Confused? Did anyone check?" He closed the folder.
"He's a dog, Clara, not a boy. We don't ask them what they're feeling."
"Maybe that's the problem," she said, almost to herself. A silence settled between them, the kind that made clocks feel too loud and hearts beat too hard. Then Mr. Caldwell exhaled.
3 days. That's what I gave you. I won't take them back. But I won't extend them either. I suggest you use them wisely.
He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold.
And if you see signs, any signs, that he's unstable, you walk away. No second chances.
He didn't wait for an answer. The door clicked softly behind him. Clara's mother turned, her face pale. "Do you understand what he just gave you?" Clara nodded. "A warning. No. A chance not to ruin your life." Clara stood slowly. "I think it might be a chance to save his." Later that night, long after her mother had gone to bed, Clara crept into the corner of the cottage where a stack of old books leaned precariously on a crate. She found the one she remembered, The Dog Who Waited, its spine cracked, its pages soft with time. She tucked it under her arm, pulled on her coat, and stepped into the night. Far off in the darkness, a shape moved behind the chain-link fence. Bran was awake, and waiting. The morning was quiet in that particular way only old places knew, a hush that settled not just on the earth but in the bones of things. Mist curled low across the grass, wrapping the estate grounds in a softness.
Children's story about a boy who could speak to wild animals, passed down from her grandmother's attic. In the other pocket, she kept a biscuit, more out of hope than strategy. The kennel loomed ahead, shadowed by tall pine and iron fencing. Its gate had been mended, reinforced after the incident, though the padlock now hung unfastened at her request. Mr. Caldwell had relented after her quiet insistence, but made no promises. He'd left her with nothing but time and the sound of a pen scratching across legal forms. Bran stood inside, exactly as she'd seen him last, still, square, and unflinching. His eyes tracked her even as his body didn't move, save the barest shift of weight from one paw to the other. She stepped just inside the enclosure, and let the gate fall gently shut behind her. No leash, no commands, just presence. Clara exhaled through her nose and lowered herself to the ground, careful not to sit too directly in front of him. Instead, she chose a spot near the edge, on the smooth plank of a wooden pallet someone had once left inside for shelter. It smelled faintly of motor oil and pine needles. Bran didn't growl, didn't blink. She opened the book and began. Once, at the far edge of a forest no one dared name, there lived a boy who never raised his voice. They called him Quiet, because he didn't need sound to be heard. Her voice was soft, not theatrical like when she read to the younger children in the workers' quarters. This was more like humming, like telling a secret to the air and hoping it knew how to listen. Bran remained motionless, but his ears swiveled slightly, not toward a threat, but a sound that didn't match memory. Clara read on. The boy would walk into the trees, with crumbs in his pockets and patience in his steps, and slowly the creatures came. Not because he demanded it, but because he didn't. The pages whispered as she turned them, each one lifting the stillness a little more. She kept her head lowered, not submissive, but gentle. Her eyes flicked to Bran only in moments between paragraphs, like checking on a sleeping child you don't want to wake. Minutes passed. She didn't count them. The morning light filtered through the trees in gold stripes, laying soft bars across the kennel floor. Bran's chest rose and fell, slower now, less guarded. His posture, while not relaxed, had eased from that rigid statue stillness. His ears tilted less sharply, his brow softened. She didn't reach for him, didn't even storm. She kept her voice low. I don't know what they called you before, or what they made you do, but I think, maybe, you were something else once, before they turned you into a warning. Bran's head tilted, just slightly. She offered nothing more, no touch, no food, not yet. Instead, she let silence return between them, like an old friend settling into a room without asking permission. A leaf drifted down from the trees, tumbling once before landing near his paw. He didn't flinch. The red tennis ball from yesterday still sat in the corner, untouched, covered in a sheen of damp earth and fur. She made no move toward it. Her body relaxed into the cold ground. She kept reading, one more page, then another, until her voice grew hoarse and her fingers stiff with chill. At one point her eyes wandered toward him, and there it was, a single deliberate flick of the tail, not wagging, but acknowledgement. Like a soldier nodding to another across a battlefield, not in surrender, but in silent accord. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She closed the book. That's enough for today. She stood slowly, letting her movements stay loose and unthreatening. Bran remained still, but his eyes followed her. Not suspicious, not hostile, just watching. She stepped back through the gate and let it close behind her with a soft click. The air outside the kennel felt thinner, lighter somehow. Clara turned once more before heading back. Bran hadn't moved, but his eyes hadn't left her. And in that lingering glance, she felt it. The first thread stretched between them. Not yet a bond, but maybe the beginning of one. From the tool shed tucked between the rose arbor and the back fence, Mr. Hank had seen everything. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, not exactly. The rusted hinge on the door creaked every time he leaned his weight against it, and he figured the girl must have heard him once or twice. But she never turned, never looked toward him. She had eyes only for the dog. And the dog didn't look at anyone else. That evening, after the sun had melted down behind the magnolias, Clara walked slowly past the gardener's shed with the book still tucked under her arm. Her steps were thoughtful, slower than usual, and for the first time in a long while there was no tremble in her shoulders. Mr. Hank set down his pruning shears and stepped into the fading light. "You read to him," he said without preamble. Clara turned, surprised, then smiled faintly. "Didn't know anyone was watching." "Well, I wasn't spying, if that's what you mean." His voice was gravel over warm wood. "I just noticed." She hesitated, then "Talk." Clara followed. The bench groaned under their weight, one side worn smoother than the other. Hank reached into his coat and pulled out a wrinkled old photograph, edges curled from time and sweat. In it, a much younger Hank, mustache darker and shoulders broader, standing beside a uniformed man whose smile barely reached his eyes. At their feet sat a German shepherd, black and tan, ears erect, gaze sharp. It wasn't Bran, but it might as well have been. "That's Rook," Hank said, tapping the photo. "Canine Unit, U.S. Border Patrol, 92. And that's Diego beside me, best handler I ever trained." Clara studied the photo carefully. "Bran was like this?" Hank nodded. "Not like. Was." He leaned back, arms crossed. "Bran wasn't some backyard dog gone bad. He was military, raised on command structure, discipline, stress response, built for crisis, not comfort." Clara held the photo gently. "Then why is he here?" "Because the war doesn't always end. When the mission does," Hank said quietly. "His partner, Officer Diego, was ambushed in a canyon sweep. They took him out. Bran made it back to base 3 days later, bloodied and limping. Sat beside the bunk for a week, waiting." Clara's fingers curled tightly around the edge of her book. "They retired him after that," Hank continued. "Too unpredictable. Couldn't reassign a dog with that kind of trauma. So they shipped him off, passed him through 2 handlers, both got scared, filed reports. Next thing you know, some rich family with connections, no offense, ends up with a dog, too broken to trust, too proud to beg." Clara looked down. "Mr. Caldwell didn't know?" "Oh, I'm sure he knew something. But paper trails get blurry when they pass through enough hands, especially when money's involved." She let the words settle in her chest. "He's not violent," Clara said at last. "He's listening, waiting." Hank's mouth tugged upward just a little. "You're not wrong." A long pause stretched between them, filled with the quiet hum of insects and the soft chirp of crickets waking in the dusk. "I want to help him," she said finally. Hank turned toward her. "Then you have to learn his language." Clara blinked. "His language?" He nodded. "Soldier dog language. Not English, not baby talk, not even trainer cues from the click like old hinges. Come by early tomorrow, before the house wakes up. I'll show you the first rule." She stood too. "What is it?" He met her eyes, serious now. "Don't reach. Let him come to you. Always. Every soldier, dog or man, needs to choose trust. You can't command it." The wind stirred the leaves above them, and somewhere in the distance, Bran barked once, short, sharp, not distressed. Clara looked toward the sound, then back at Hank. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This isn't a trick. It's a translation, and it takes time." She nodded once. As she walked back toward the servant quarters, Clara felt something deep and still blooming quietly beneath the fear. Not hope exactly, not yet, but maybe something older than that, a kind of understanding. She didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the beginning of everything, and Bran, from his place in the shadows beyond the pines, already knew it. Dawn broke softly over the Caldwell estate, painting the dewy fields in a hush of gold and gray. The manor's windows still slept, but beneath the rustling willows behind the tool shed, a girl stood in borrowed boots, 2 sizes too big, hands trembling just slightly, trying to remember how not to be afraid. Shoulders down, chin level. Don't look too long, but don't look away either. Mr. Hank's voice was low, steady, like gravel smoothed by water. He stood behind her, arms crossed, watching the way she adjusted her posture one breath at a time. "Dogs like Bran don't speak bark," he said. "They speak presence. You walk in like a question, he'll treat you like one. Walk in like an answer, he'll listen." Clara swallowed. Her heart beat high in her chest. In front of them, just beyond the fencing, where wild grass had started to overtake the path, Bran sat inside his kennel, head slightly tilted, eyes unreadable. He hadn't moved since they arrived, but he hadn't turned away either. Hank nodded toward the wire gate. "Go on. Remember, no sudden moves. You're not trying to impress him. Just invite." Clara stepped forward. Each step over the dry grass felt like a test. The air smelled of earth and faded storm. Her fingers curled slightly, resisting the urge to fidget. She remembered Hank's advice. Stillness isn't silence, it's permission. She stopped just a foot outside the gate. Bran remained seated, eyes following her, not wary, not welcoming, just present. She crouched, slow, even knees, no bend of spine too fast. The way Hank taught her, not to tower, not to shrink, just to be at his level. "Now breathe," Hank whispered from behind. She did. In, then out. Slow, no insistence. Seconds passed, maybe more. The world around them hushed into something that felt like waiting. Then Bran stood. No sound, no warning. His muscles moved like a ripple beneath his fur, deliberate, old. He stepped once, then twice. Clara didn't blink. His head lowered, nostrils flaring, and then, gently, deliberately, his tongue swept over her palm, taking the pieces one by one. He didn't brush, didn't bare teeth, didn't retreat. Just ate and stayed. Clara felt something loosen deep in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but something older, a kind of release, like wind through a cracked window. "That's it," Hank murmured. "That's a signal." She glanced back. "What signal?" "He chose you." Bran sat again, only inches from her hand now. His tail, thick and dark, gave one faint flick against the dirt. She didn't smile, not outwardly, but something inside her bloomed and pulsed like a heartbeat she hadn't felt in years. She stayed with him like that for a long time. No words, no tricks, just breathing, just being. Later that morning, She returned, alone this time, with a faded notepad tucked beneath her arm. She sat just outside the kennel gate, her back to the wall, legs crossed. She didn't speak. Instead, she mimicked what Hank showed her. A slight shift in weight, a gentle roll of the wrist, the way her shadow fell across the threshold, the tilt of her chin. Never too high, never confrontational. Bran watched. When she dropped a bit of apple near her boot, he came forward and took it without hesitation. Clara lowered her hand, didn't move. And then something happened that startled her so much she nearly cried. Bran lowered his head onto the dirt beside her boot. Not touching her, not leaning in, just there, close enough that she could hear his breath. She reached out, not to pet him, not to control him, just to let her fingers hover above the space between them like a silent bridge. He didn't move away. She whispered, not to him, but into the air between them, barely audible. "Thank you." Behind the shrubs, Hank watched from a distance he knew was sacred. He didn't interrupt, didn't applaud. The signal had been sent, and answered. That night, as Clara rinsed dishes in the staff kitchen, her mother glanced at her hands, raw from dirt, but calmer somehow. "What are you doing with that dog?" Her voice held the tightness of worry, not accusation. Clara didn't answer at first. Then, with a softness she hadn't used in years, she said, "I'm trying to be still." Her mother paused. Ghost of laughter from some other life. She had found it wedged beneath a loose floorboard in the shed behind the laundry house, a place the other children never touched, and where memories tended to settle like dust. That morning, Clara cupped the ball in both hands as she walked the familiar path toward Bran's kennel, dew clinging to her shoes and a quiet resolve warming the space just below her ribs. She didn't speak. She never did with him now. The language they shared wasn't made of words, but of weight shifts and breath, and the quiet ache of not being needed, until someone needed you. Bran lay curled in the corner of his enclosure when she arrived. His coat shimmered slightly in the light that broke through the willow trees. He didn't move, just opened one eye, slow and unbothered, the way old soldiers do when their sleep is light and nothing surprises them anymore. Clara crouched beside the gate, carefully placing the red ball on the earth between them. Then she sat back, waited. For a long moment Bran said nothing, did nothing. His gaze flicked to the ball, then to her, and back again, but with no change in his posture, no tail flick, no lean forward, just stillness. She didn't sigh, though something in her wanted to. Instead, she leaned her back against the wood slat fence and let the sun warm the crown of her head. Her fingers absently pulled at a loose thread on her shirt hem. "This belonged to my cousin," she whispered. Not to him, not even to herself, really, just to the silence. "He used to say red was faster. I don't think that's true. But maybe it felt that way when we ran." Bran blinked. No sound. So she stayed a while, let time soften around them. At one point, she picked up the ball again and rolled it gently in her palms, letting it brush across her knuckles, like an idea she hadn't decided on yet. Then, without warning, she stood up, not abrupt, just with purpose. She tossed the ball, not far. It arced lazily and landed just outside the edge of the enclosure, bouncing once, then settling into a patch of moss with a small, tired sound. She didn't look at Bran, didn't ask him to fetch it. Instead, she tilted her head and muttered, half playfully, "Oh, well, I guess it's gone then." And she turned her back. Slowly, not dramatically. Just enough to suggest she was done with it, with not panting or wagging, just standing, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Clara knelt down slowly, heart blooming in quiet bursts inside her chest. "Thank you," she said, barely above a breath. Bran sat down. She didn't throw the ball again that day. She didn't need to. The test had never been about fetching. It was about offering a piece of herself and seeing if he'd carry it back. Later that evening, she sat on the back steps of the staff quarters, ball in lap, watching as the last light peeled itself from the sky. Mr. Hank shuffled up beside her, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that looked older than the manor itself. "He brought it back?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Clara nodded. Hank took a seat beside her, joints cracking in protest. "Old habits don't die easy," he said, voice like worn gravel. "But old dogs, they remember the good things. Sometimes they just forget they're allowed to." She looked down at the ball, then out at the path leading back to the kennels, now cloaked in the hush of dusk. "I think he's still afraid," she said softly. "Fear ain't weakness," Hank replied. "It's memory." He stood, patting her shoulder with a quiet familiarity. "Keep showing him different memories. He'll come around." As he walked away, Clara rolled the red ball gently in her palms again, the warmth of Bran's breath still lingering on its surface. That night, when the world had gone still and the windows of the Caldwell estate glowed like distant stars, Clara left the ball outside the gate of Bran's kennel. Not as bait, not as a game, just as a reminder. Someone still believed he could return what had once been taken. It had rained through the night, not the kind of storm that rattled windows or made the dogs howl, but a steady, whispering rain, the kind that made the trees nod off to sleep and left the earth soft enough to remember things come morning. Clara woke to that kind of stillness, the kind that feels like a held breath, the kind that comes after something happens. She slipped out of bed, bare feet brushing the creaky floorboards of the servants' quarters. Her mother was already gone, likely to the main house, preparing breakfast trays and arranging the silver that no one would thank her for. But Clara lingered by the window. The world outside looked rinsed. Pale gray sky, wet leaves glistening, everything quieter than usual, like even the wind had tiptoed away. She pulled on her coat, still damp from yesterday's walk, and opened the front door of the small cabin. Then she stopped. There in the mud just beyond the porch steps was a trail. Not footprints, paw prints, large, deep, four-toed with worn claws that had pressed slightly askew in the softened earth, one after another, leading from the woods behind but with something that trembled closer to awe. Bran had followed her, not as a predator, not as a patrol, as a guardian. He hadn't scratched or barked, he hadn't even let her know he was there. But he'd come, and then he'd left. She stepped forward, kneeling just above the nearest print, her breath misting in the cold air. The pad impressions were slightly smeared by drizzle, but unmistakable. He had stood there, right where she now sat. For how long, she didn't know, but long enough for the rain to shape around him, long enough for the wind to forget to chase him off. She pressed her fingers beside one of the paw prints. It dwarfed her hand, not in threat but in presence, like the memory of someone who had once stood between danger and silence and never asked for praise.
Then, without thinking, Clara stood and ducked back inside. From the narrow drawer beneath her cot, she pulled a faded scarf, the soft wool one her aunt had sent last Christmas, the one her mother had never liked because it was frayed on one edge and not suitable for the manner. But Clara had worn it often, wrapped it around her chin on windy days, tugged it close on walks through the orchard. It smelled like old books and pine. It smelled like her. She folded it once, then stepped back outside. There, just beside the top porch step, she laid the scarf down gently. No ceremony, no ribbon, just warmth waiting. A quiet offering. She didn't say anything, didn't call out or whistle. That wasn't how this worked. It wasn't about summoning. It was about trust. She stood there for a minute, watching the trees sway. A blue jay scolded her from the fence post, then flew off. Then she turned and went inside, closing the door softly behind her. That day, she said nothing to her mother, not when she noticed Clara's shoes muddy again, not when she scolded her for staring too long out the window after chores, not even when Mr. Caldwell arrived that evening to discuss Bran's upcoming assessment. Clara listened. She nodded when expected, but she didn't mention the paw prints or the scarf. Some things don't need to be shared to be real. That night, sleep came slowly. The wind picked up again, brushing the eaves of the cabin with soft fingers. Just before midnight, Clara sat up. Something pulled at her, not a sound, not a fear, just a knowing. She padded barefoot to the door again, opened it slowly. The scarf was gone. No note, no print. Just the faintest indentation where it had lain, and beside it, one new paw print, barely pressed into the drying earth. He had come again, taken it, accepted her offering, trusted her scent. Clara stepped back and closed the door, her heart swollen and soft. She climbed back into bed, pulled the covers to her chin, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, she smiled into the dark. A dog once considered broken now carried a piece of her, and he had chosen it freely. It was a Sunday afternoon, soft and unthreatening. The air smelled like river reed and drying grass. Somewhere across the Caldwell estate, wind chimes clinked from a guesthouse porch. Clara had spent the morning picking bruised apples from behind the orchard wall, spoils nobody else wanted, and had tucked 2 into her pocket for Bran. She wasn't supposed to be near the kennel that day. Mr. Caldwell had told her Bran needed quiet time for behavioral evaluation. Mrs. Caldwell had offered a polite but firm look, the kind adults used when they didn't want to say no directly, but meant it just the same. Still, Clara wandered behind the hedge. She didn't approach the kennel, just crouched in the tall grass between 2 elderberry shrubs, where the shadows were thick and safe. She could see the fencing through the branches, the shape of Bran's body lying low near the back wall, motionless but not asleep. He always looked like that now, quiet, waiting, reading the world more than reacting to it. Clara didn't move. She just watched, the way she'd learned from Hank. Let the silence do the talking. Let the moment unfold. Then it happened. A sharp, high-pitched screech tore across the calm. It came from the opposite end of the yard, behind the old greenhouse, where the neighbor's kid, Jamie, had taken to playing with a toy he'd won at the town fair the week before. A cheap plastic whistle with a pitch like splitting glass, the kind that wasn't meant to imitate anything, but somehow did. In an instant, Bran was no longer still. He sprang to his feet, rigid, ears back, head low, eyes wide and glazed over, not furious, not alert, terrified. Clara froze. The whistle blew again, once, then twice. Bran's body twisted, tail tucked so tight
It nearly disappeared into his haunches. He let out a low, guttural growl, not a warning, but a reflex. His legs buckled slightly, as though he couldn't decide whether to run or brace for something worse. Then came the trembling. Full body, uncontrolled. His mouth opened slightly, not to bark, not to bite. Just to breathe, to gulp air like someone drowning on dry land. Clara's throat tightened. She stayed behind the bush, not out of fear, but because something in her gut told her that stepping forward now wouldn't help. This wasn't a moment to fix, it was a moment to witness. The third blow of the whistle came. Bran flinched violently, almost collapsing to the kennel floor. His nails scraped the concrete. His chest heaved. Eyes darted toward shadows that weren't there, ghosts that hadn't left. Clara saw something she— "Enough with that noise!" And the sound ceased as suddenly as it came. Silence fell again. But the damage had been done. Bran didn't settle. He paced, tight circles, like he was trying to make the cage disappear. His breath was loud, desperate. A sharp yelp escaped his throat, not angry, not defiant, a plea, and then, after 2 long minutes, he sank back to the floor, pressed against the farthest corner of the kennel, face turned toward the wall. Not because he was hiding, because he couldn't bear to look at the world just yet. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, fingers curling in the fabric of her dress. Her eyes stung. But she didn't cry. She only watched, because suddenly the story around Bran, the rumors, the labels, the file-marked aggressive tendencies felt paper-thin. What she saw wasn't a dangerous dog. It was a soldier with nowhere left to run. Later that night, Clara didn't tell her mother what she saw. She didn't mention the whistle to Mr. Caldwell either. She just sat on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the hush of branches swaying. The next morning she woke early and made her way to the back fence again. The grass was wet with dew. The path still bore her footprints from yesterday. She carried no book this time, no ball, no scarf, only herself. As she neared the kennel, Bran was already standing, not at the far wall but closer now, near the front gate, watching her. Not expectant, but not afraid either. Clara stopped a few feet away, sat on the damp ground. Their eyes met. And this time, it wasn't just recognition. It was memory, and something quieter. Something like apology, or maybe forgiveness. Not hers, his, for losing himself in the dark, and somehow trusting she would still be there when he surfaced. The shed smelled of cedar oil and rusted bolts, as it always did. Late evening sun filtered through the warped glass, laying soft golden slats across the floor. Clara stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly, not from cold, but to hold something inside. She hadn't meant to end up here. Her feet had led her without asking. Mr. Hank was fixing a fence hinge on the work table, his fingers thick with old calluses, moving slow and careful. The old man didn't look up at first, but he always knew when she was near. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he said, voice low, like the hush of wind through dry— "You're Bran, and the man who saved him from the pound." Clara picked it up gently. In the photo, Bran looked younger, his fur glossier, eyes just as intense but less weathered. He sat proud beside a tall man in tactical uniform. The man had dark hair and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His hand rested firmly but tenderly on Bran's shoulder, like he knew it was an honor to stand beside that dog. His name was Diego Morales, Hank said, voice colored by the reverence of someone speaking of the dead. Best damn handler I ever met. That dog wasn't a weapon to him. He was family. Clara traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. What happened? Hank hesitated. He pulled out a second photo, this one cut from a newspaper. The headline read, Border Patrol Unit ambushed, 2 injured, 1 missing. He was deployed down near El Paso. Surveillance turned into a trap. Gunfire, smoke, chaos, Hank murmured. Diego didn't make it out. His team found his body under a collapsed embankment. And Bran? Clara whispered. Gone, Hank said. Vanished. For 26 days. Thought he died. Or turned wild. Her breath caught. But he came back? Dragged himself to a ranger station nearly 30 miles from the ambush site. Covered in barbed wire, one eye swollen shut, paws raw. Wouldn't let anyone touch him except one rookie officer who spoke softly in Spanish. They said he limped straight to the flagpole and lay down under it. Didn't move for hours. Clara didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat had tightened like it was mourning something she'd only just come to understand. Mr. Hank sat down with a soft groan, wiping his brow. They reassigned him, tried to retrain him for civilian canine service, but he was different, wouldn't obey, wouldn't trust. Had a couple of episodes. One trainer got bit. Another had his hand broken when Bran jerked the leash mid-command. After that, they marked him unstable. But he wasn't unstable, Clara said, eyes locked to Bran's in the photo. He was lost. Hank met her gaze and for once didn't correct her. No one ever told him Diego died. No one let him grieve, he said. They expected him to reboot like a machine. A gust of wind rattled a tin wall. Outside, the first stars were threading themselves into the darkening sky. Clara ran a finger over the unit patch, the stitching nearly rubbed out. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. He still remembers. Mr. Hank nodded. Every soldier does. Especially the 4-legged ones. They don't forget, they just carry. Clara's heart ached with a new kind of sorrow, one that belonged not just to Bran, but to every dog made to serve a world that rarely repaid the debt. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Hank looked down. His hands trembled slightly now, like the truth was heavier than time. Because I thought it'd hurt more than help, and maybe I... Wrong. He reached out, placed the photo gently into her hands. You want to help that dog? He asked. She nodded. Then don't talk to him like a pet. Don't command him like a soldier. Learn his language, of breath, of posture, of presence. The one Diego used. She nodded again, firmer this time. Will you teach me? Hank smiled, just slightly. The kind of smile that creaked open after years of rust. I already started, he said. Outside the shed, the air had cooled into the blue-gray hush between dusk and night. Bran sat alone in his kennel, but when Clara stepped past the hedgerow, his ears perked. He didn't rise, didn't bark, just noticed her. She didn't say anything. She just sat across from him, behind the fence, as if to say, I see you now. Not just the body, but the history that walks beside you. And in the long silence that followed, there was no command, only understanding, and maybe, just maybe, peace. The thunderstorm arrived like an invading army. No warning drizzle, no polite rumble on the horizon, just a crack of sky that shook the rafters of the servants' quarters and sent Clara's candle sputtering out. Rain hammered the tin roof, each drop a clipped command, "Stay indoors," but she was already lacing her boots. Across the grounds, lightning strobed over the pines, turning Bran's kennel into a flickering negative. Metal bars, wet concrete, a lone silhouette pacing tight, frantic circles. Clara saw it from her window and felt the jolt in her chest. The same jolt she'd felt when Jamie's whistle split the afternoon. She grabbed the small flashlight Mr. Hank had loaned her, wrapped Diego's faded unit patch in her fist like a talisman, and eased the cottage door open. Wind slapped her cheeks with cold rain. Somewhere behind her, dishes rattled in their cupboards, but her mother didn't stir. Clara kept low, letting the hedgerows block the worst of the gusts. Each flash of lightning lit the path, then left her in velvet black darkness. She counted her steps, the way Hank had taught her. 4 breaths forward, 1 pause to listen. The storm drowned most sounds, but she still heard Bran, an agonized, war-torn howl that rose, broke, and rose again. When she reached the kennel, another bolt split the sky. For a heartbeat, the world froze in white. Bran's eyes wide and glassy, his chest heaving, the fence rattling where his shoulder had slammed it. He wasn't snarling at the night. He was fighting something. Own legs gave out. He tried to rise, failed, tried again. Fear, not fury, twisted his body. Clara pressed her palm flat against the cold wire. "Bran," she whispered, keeping her voice low, steady, the way Hank spoke to spooked horses. She made no shushing sounds, just let him hear the shape of his own name. He lunged one more time toward the far corner, then whipped around, ears flattened, eyes searching. Another crack of thunder boomed. He barked hoarsely, but the sound ended in a whine. Clara slid her arm through the gap where the mesh had bent months before, a space barely wide enough for a child's forearm. Rain soaked her sleeve, ran down her wrist. She didn't reach for his head. She placed her hand, palm up, on the concrete and waited. Bran's pacing slowed. He smelled her first. Soap, earth, the faint musk of scarf wool he'd carried away days earlier. His trembling eased by degrees, like gears grinding toward stillness. One cautious step, then another, and his nose touched her fingers, cold, wet, trembling. Lightning flashed again. Bran flinched, but this time he didn't bolt. Clara kept her hand steady. "I'm here," she breathed, barely sound, mostly breath. The next growl that rose in his chest didn't end in panic. It melted into a low, uncertain rumble. He lowered himself until his chest brushed the floor. Tentative, he slid one huge paw toward her hand inside the fence. She opened her fingers. His paw settled into her palm, heavy, shaking. Raindrops slid off his fur and pooled between their skin and pad. Clara imagined the border canyon Hank had described. Gunfire, sirens, a handler's last command lost to dust. And she felt the echo of that terror vibrating through Bran's bones. A boom of thunder rolled overhead. Bran's nails stiffened against her skin, the tremor peaking, then ebbing. She timed her breathing with his, in 2-3, out 2-3. Hank's cadence, Diego's cadence, soldier cadence. Gradually, the storm inside the kennel quieted, even as rain still pummeled the roof. Bran's ears eased forward, his jaw unclenched. Each breath came a second longer, a fraction deeper. Clara dared to turn on the flashlight, pointing it downward so the glow spilled gently across the concrete, warm and steady, an anchor in the strobing dark. Bran's eyes followed the circle of light, then returned to her face. "Good," she murmured. She didn't praise him like a pet. She acknowledged him like a partner. His paw remained in her hand, weight thrumming with pulse. Minutes blurred. Thunder stumbled east, the mud, humming a tune she barely remembered, something her grandmother used to sing while braiding sweetgrass. Bran's ears twitched at the melody. He didn't rise. When the clouds thinned and moonlight broke through, Clara stood, muscles stiff, and backed away 3 slow steps, the soldier's goodbye Hank had taught her. Bran watched, tail thumping once against the floor, not wagging eager, but answering her signal. Understood. She clicked off the flashlight and turned toward the cottage, the scent of wet pine heavy in the air. Behind her, Bran's kennel was silent. No pacing, no howl, just the quiet breathing of a dog who'd weathered another battle and found, beyond the flash of memory, a hand waiting in the dark. Clara whispered into the night, words the wind carried, but Bran, somehow, already knew. Not alone, not anymore. The morning after the storm smelled of bleach and polished silver, an odor Clara always associated with trouble. Rain-washed air had barely dried before Mrs. Caldwell ordered every veranda rail wiped down, every window re-shined for appearances. Servants hurried like sparrows beneath a hawk shadow, sensing something sharper than routine in the air. Clara felt it too. She'd been summoned to the study, one of those high-ceilinged rooms lined with leather-spined books nobody read. Her boots were still damp from the kennel mud, and she could feel the water seeping through her socks, cold against the parquet floor. Mr. Caldwell stood behind his desk, back to the door, staring out the tall window that framed the eastern lawn. He didn't turn when she entered. He kept talking, as though to the glass. 3 days, he said, each word clipped, precise. That was the agreement. Clara swallowed. Yes, sir. He turned then, brown eyes hard as varnish. A crisp envelope lay on the blotter, bearing a logo she didn't recognize, an angular A threaded with a medical serpent. The agreement has changed. His voice held no anger, something colder, decision. She clasped her hands behind her back the way her mother had taught her, when rich people needed no reminder of rank. How, sir? Your dog, he corrected himself. The dog will be transferred to the Brookhaven Neurological Research Facility in Atlanta. Transport leaves Saturday morning. Saturday, barely 3 days away. Clara's breath snagged. But the trial is concluded, he said, sliding the envelope toward her with one finger. Brookhaven specializes in combat-induced aggression. Their lead neurologist believes Bran's brain can offer insight into PTSD pathways. They require live shock cages, she blurted before she could stop herself. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on his. I've read about places like that. They call it science, but it's necessary, he finished, steel sliding into his tone. If he attacks someone here, Clara, a lawsuit will bury this family, the staff, potentially your mother's livelihood. Brookhaven assumes all liability. They pay a substantial fee. Everyone is protected, except Bran. Mr. Caldwell exhaled through his nose. You asked for 3 days to prove he's safe. Since then, he's howled loud enough to wake half the estate, slammed the fencing until it bent, and terrified my neighbor's boy with a single bark. I reviewed the camera footage. He looked feral. He was afraid, she whispered. Fear bites the same as rage, he said. Then, softer, almost tired, as though reciting a line he'd already debated in his own head. Some creatures can't be brought back, Clara. Silence pooled between them, heavy as rainwater in a ditch. Mr. Caldwell walked around the desk and handed her a thin folder, Brand's incident reports, stamped in red. You've shown heart, no one disputes that. But heart doesn't outweigh risk. He paused, studying the lines of her face, the way appraisers inspect flawed crystal. Spend today saying goodbye if you wish. After that, the matter is closed. He turned away, conversation over. Clara felt her pulse hammer in her ears. She should curtsy, thank him for his time, retreat like staff are trained to do. Instead, she stepped forward. Sir, Diego Morales is dead because he shielded civilians in a canyon ambush. Bran carried the smell of his blood for 26 days. He's not broken. He's grieving. Caldwell's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn. Where did you hear that name? Mr. Hank showed me. She clutched the folder to her chest. Brookhaven can study chemicals and shock responses, but it won't fix grief. It will just teach him new ways to fear. He faced her now, frown deepening. You think emotion overrides biology? I think love built that biology, she said, voice trembling but clear. Diego loved him. He loved Diego. He remembers. If you send him away, you're not curing anything. You're erasing the only thing tying him to who he was. Caldwell studied her a long moment, eyes narrowing as though searching for the trick. Then he shook his head, breath leaving in a clipped sigh. Passion is admirable, Clara, but business is unromantic. Decision stands. He opened the door, a silent order to leave. She stepped out. Liability clauses. A transport manifest dated Saturday, 08 a.m. A shadow fell over her. Mr. Hank stooped, gathering the scattered sheets. His brow furrowed as he read the heading. They're shipping him, Clara choked out. I have 3 days, maybe less. Hank's jaw set. He slipped the papers back into the folder and handed it to her. Then we fight time, he said, voice low and iron steady. Start now. How? We show that man what science can't measure. She wiped rain-salt tears she hadn't noticed forming. Trust? Loyalty, Hank corrected. The kind that walks beside you when bullets start flying. He touched the brim of his cap and started down the corridor toward the back door. Clara followed, heart pounding not with despair now, but with a desperate, rallying resolve. 3 days, 1 wounded soldier, and a truth that needed louder thunder than any storm could bring. They would start now, and somehow, by weekend, prove a dog's life was worth more than a line item in a liability ledger. The orchard lay beyond the eastern paddock, where rows of pecan trees flanked a clearing soft with fallen leaves. Afternoon light sifted through the branches in warm bands, turning every drifting mote of dust into slow-moving gold. It was quiet here, far enough from the manor that the clatter of luncheon china faded to a hush, but close enough that the house's tall chimneys still speared the sky like watchtowers. Clara stood at the center of the clearing, pulse drumming against her ribs. Bran sat at her left heel, posture relaxed but attentive, ears forward, tail resting in the grass. She felt the heat of his flank radiate through her jeans and tried to breathe the way Hank had shown her. In on 4, out on 6. Slow enough that the heart begins to copy the lungs. In the distance, Sophia Caldwell leaned against a low stone wall, lavender summer dress brushing her ankles. She'd come without invitation, but not without purpose. Clara could see it in the way she clutched her notebook, eyes sharp beneath her wide-brim hat. 10 paces behind her, Tyler lingered in the dappled shade, arms crossed, face unreadable. He claimed boredom, but hadn't left. "Whenever you're ready," Hank called softly. He stood off to one side, hands behind his back, the veteran's stance of letting the student own the field. Clara, his weight. She glanced to her left, then forward again. Brand pivoted with a light, precise turn, facing the same direction. Sophia whispered, "That's impossible. He's off lead." Tyler's only response was a low whistle. But it wasn't mocking. It was wonder. He tried, and failed, to smother. Clara took a breath. She raised her hand waist level, palm open, fingers relaxed. Brand's ears twitched. She rotated her wrist counterclockwise, a gesture Hank had taught her that morning. Search, but stay close. Brand trotted 3 yards out, nose low, weaving between 2 pecan trunks, never once glancing toward the property fence or the wide spaces beyond. When he reached the perimeter Clara had silently set, marked by a line of pine cones, he paused, looked back, and waited. "Come," she said, voice barely louder than a thought. Brand returned at a calm jog, tail level, mouth open in an easy pant. No bark, no bolt. He stopped at her side and sat, shoulder brushing her knee. Hank gave a single approving nod. Clara's heart soared, but she steadied her voice. "Good." She reached into her pocket and withdrew the red tennis ball, the one Brand had fetched of his own accord. She let it roll from her fingertips. Brand's eyes tracked the ball but did not lunge. Instead he looked at her, awaiting permission. Clara flicked 2 fingers downward. "Retrieve." Brand bounded after the ball, snagged it mid-bounce, then trotted back, dropping it in her open hand without slobber or hesitation. Only then did Clara offer him a fragment of apple, which he accepted with gentle precision. From the wall, Sophia clapped, soft, restrained, but genuine. Tyler shifted forward, as though pulled by a magnet he refused to name. Clara didn't turn toward them. She was inside a circle only she and Brand could see. She tossed the ball again, this time higher, farther. Brand sprinted beneath the canopy, sun flashing off his coat. He leapt, caught it, landed with feline grace. For a moment, the orchard was all motion, leaves showering around him like bronze confetti. Then he trotted back, slower now, calm settling over him like a blanket after flight. He placed the ball in Clara's palm and, unprompted, pressed his muzzle against her thigh. Not a lean for support, but a gesture of connection. Clara's throat tightened. She rested her free hand on his head, fingers sifting through damp fur. A cough broke the spell. Tyler stepped forward, hands shoved in pockets. "How'd you teach him that in 2 days?" Clara met his gaze, surprised by the absence of mockery. "I didn't." He remained seated, weight lightly resting against Clara. She felt the solidness of him, the heartbeat steady beneath muscle. Trust made flesh. Something sacred was forming here, in the hush between storm and deadline.
Hank approached, boots crunching over twigs. "That's enough for today. Don't push him." Clara exhaled, realizing how tight her shoulders were. She nodded, pocketed the ball, and gave Bran a final scratch behind the ear. "That'll do, partner." The word partner lingered in the air like incense. Bran's tail thumped once against the grass. A silent answer. Sophia stepped closer, notebook open. "Can I write this down? Every cue, every response?" Clara smiled, fatigue mingling with hope. "Write all you want. We need every witness we can get." As they walked back toward the manor, Bran trotting beside Clara in a perfect loose heel, Tyler fell in step on her other side. He didn't speak, but after a moment, his hand drifted down, fingers brushing Bran's back in a tentative stroke. Bran didn't flinch. The sacred thing between them widened, big enough now to carry possibility. And somewhere inside Clara's chest, the panic of Mr. Caldwell's ultimatum softened into resolve. 2 days left, 2 chances to prove that loyalty could rewrite fate. She tightened her grip on the red ball in her pocket and kept walking. Bran's steady breath matching her own under the whispering pecan leaves. The library smelled of lemon oil and old victories. Late afternoon sun poured through the stained glass transom, casting jeweled shapes across rows of leather-bound books that no one dared remove. Clara had never been summoned to this room before. Visitors usually met Mr. Caldwell in the formal parlor. But Sophia said her father preferred serious conversations amid histories he could touch. Bran waited outside with Mr. Hank. Clara could feel the dog's trust, like a warm hand between her shoulder blades as she stepped over the Persian rug. Sophia hovered near the door, notebook clutched to her chest, while Tyler leaned against a globe stand, face tight with something like guilt. Mr. Caldwell stood at a vast mahogany desk, back to the room, reading a document stamped Brookhaven Transport Authority. Beside him, a man in a charcoal suit adjusted gold-rimmed glasses and flicked dust from his sleeve. The family's legal advisor, Mr. Randall Myers, called in whenever money needed armor. "Father," Sophia began, voice composed, "Clara has—" He raised a hand. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. He turned, eyes landing on Clara with the distant curiosity one might give a sparrow that somehow flew into a— "With him he behaves," Myers interjected smoothly, "under your supervision. Liability law doesn't consider singular handlers. It considers foreseeable risk. If that animal harms a guest," he nodded toward the window where garden tables glittered in sun, "our exposure could reach 7 figures. Mr. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Clara swallowed. "What's the cost," she asked, voice trembling, "of destroying something loyal, of sending him to be tested?" She forced herself to hold Caldwell's gaze. "You saw no bark, no bolt, no aggression. He stayed with me because he wanted to. And what happens when you attend school, Clara?" Myers' smile was polite cruelty. "When staff changes shifts, dogs don't sign guarantees." Sophia stepped beside Clara. "We could hire Hank to manage Bran full-time. Keep him isolated from guests when necessary." "Precedent," Myers countered. "If we allow 1 rehabilitated canine, every rescue charity will want to place animals here. The estate is not a sanctuary." Clara turned back to Caldwell, desperation cracking her voice. "He carried a dying man through a canyon. He waited 26 days alone. He followed me to the cottage and left a gift in the dark because he still believes humans can be kind." Tears blurred the room.
Please, sir, give me until Monday's sunrise. One more test, with you watching, with anyone you choose. If he fails, I'll open the van door myself." Tyler flinched at her words. Sophia's hand found Clara's wrist, a small anchor. Mr. Caldwell's gaze softened, fractional but real. Clara saw it, the businessman wrestling the father who'd watched a calm dog steady his fragile daughter after a seizure. He opened his mouth. Myers slid a new folder onto the desk. Charts of payout structures, bullet points highlighting experimental therapy grant and tax offset valuation. Brookhaven's offer doubles if the dog arrives by Saturday noon. They're launching a neural mapping protocol Monday. Delay voids the contract. The softness in Caldwell's eyes shuttered. His fingers tapped the ledger, click, click, like pistol hammers. He wasn't cruel. He was calculating sorrow against spreadsheets. "I appreciate your passion, Clara," he said, voice carefully even. "But fiduciary duty outweighs sentiment. Transport stands." The words punched the air from her chest. Saturday, less than 48 hours. Sophia stepped forward. "Father." "Enough," he looked at his children, weariness edging command. "This decision protects this household and you." A glance at Clara. "I'm sorry." He turned away. Discussion over. Clara's knees wobbled. Tyler guided her to a chair before she fell. The tennis ball slipped from her grasp, rolled across the rug.
Pecan tree, sunlight striping his coat, waiting, as he always did, for the next command, the next chance to prove he still mattered. Her vision blurred. For the first time since Diego's photograph, Clara felt something break. Not inside Bran, but inside her. A thin, hopeless snap. She stood. Words came brittle. "Thank you for listening." She gathered the ball, turned and walked out, Sophia close behind. Tyler followed, shoulders hunched. In the hall, Clara pressed her forehead to the cool plaster, fighting sobs. Sophia touched her shoulder. "We're not done," she whispered fiercely. "Dad thinks money shields souls, but he hasn't seen what Bran does for Samantha. We'll make him watch." "How?" Clara rasped. Tyler answered, voice rough. "By showing him what happens when Bran isn't here." His eyes held something fierce now, protective. "You still have the red ball?" Clara nodded. "Then keep it. Saturday isn't here yet." Mr. Hank appeared from the veranda door, Bran at heel. The dog's ears flattened at Clara's tear-streaked face. He pressed his muzzle against her palm. She knelt, burying her fingers in his fur, breathing in the scent of wet earth and cedar. 2 days left. 2 days to turn a ledger line into a life worth saving. She closed her eyes against despair and felt Bran's heartbeat under her hand, steady, loyal, waiting. And Clara swore, on that heartbeat, that the next 48 hours would echo louder than any liability clause ever written. Night fell without ceremony. No moon, no gossiping stars. Only a quilt of thick cloud blotting the estate in velvet dark. Wind worried the pecan leaves, but the manor windows glowed on, oblivious. A ballroom waltz thrumming, crystal laughter spilling across patios. It was Friday, the eve of a charity gala Mrs. Caldwell had deemed unmissable. And that irony was Clara's one thin sliver of luck. The house was too busy being important to notice anyone slipping away. She padded across the lawn in borrowed barn boots, heart knocking like a fist on a locked door. Bran trotted beside her, low and silent,
a darker shadow against the grass. No collar, no leash, only a strip of her faded scarf tied loose around his neck. Their quiet packed in wool and rain scent. They skirted the floodlit terraces, ducked beneath azalea hedges still dripping from the afternoon sprinkle, then cut across the orchard where the ground remembered yesterday's triumph. Bran sniffed the air once. Soil. A whippoorwill called somewhere deep, and the creek murmured like distant applause. Clara's flashlight stayed dark. Hank had warned that beams travel farther than footfalls. Instead, she trusted the dog beside her, matching his careful pace over roots and moss. They walked 30 minutes by her quick count, though time felt rubbery, stretching and snapping back, until the trees parted to reveal Hank's fishing cabin, a slumped A-frame of cedar shakes, crouched beside the creek. Its one window glowed faint amber. The old man was waiting. Hank pushed the door open before she could knock. Lamplight carved lines into his weather-creased face. "You made it," he said, voice a gruff whisper. Relief, reprimand, and pride braided into 2 words. Bran slipped past him, nose twitching at the unfamiliar interior. Tackle boxes, wool blankets, the metallic tang of real oil. Hank latched the door, slid a plank across for good measure. "Gala started?" he asked. Clara nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "They won't miss me until the photographs." "Good." Hank dug in a crate and produced a battered thermos, poured water into a metal bowl for Bran. The dog drank, gaze flicking between the humans, as though cataloging their worry. When he finished, he lay near the hearth, chin on paws, alert but calm. The cabin seemed to exhale. Hank studied Clara. "You understand this buys you hours, not days. Transports do, at dawn." "I know." She untied the scarf from Bran's neck, fidgeting with the frayed edge. "If we hide him here, maybe Dad will reconsider," Sophia had said when they hatched the plan. But Sophia was back at the manor, feeding guests false leads. "I saw the dog near the stables, Father. Perhaps he's slipped his chain." A stall tactic, nothing more. Hank tugged aside a curtain. Through the trees, faint estate lights pulsed like distant artillery. "When Caldwell notices that kennel empty, he calls security. They'll sweep the woods in under an hour. Sheriff, too, if they think the animal's dangerous." Clara's shoulders sagged. "Then what do we do?" "Make a decision," he said gently. "Fight in the open or run farther than they're willing to chase." He retrieved a topographic map, spread it on the table, ridges, service roads, the long swath of national forest stretching south. "I got a buddy with a retired canine ranch past Hickory Ridge. No labs, no scalpels, but it's 15 miles. Night trek. Bran can make it," she whispered. "Question is, can you?" Thunder grumbled far off. Reminder of last night's ghosts. Bran lifted his head, ears pricked. Clara laid a hand on his neck. "If he keeps waiting for me, I'll keep up." Hank's weathered eyes softened. He opened a drawer, pulled out Diego's unit patch, stitched yesterday onto a simple canvas harness. Then, he shouldn't reverence. Bran stood taller, as if a missing piece had clicked into place. Boots crunched outside. 3 quick steps. Then silence. Clara's blood iced. Hank killed the lamp. Cabin fell into velvet. Through a gap in the boards, flashlight beams slashed between trunks. Estate security, earlier than planned. Out the back. Hank murmured. Clara opened the rear hatch to knee-high ferns. Rain began again, thin needles tapping leaves. Perfect cover, or perfect trail. She stepped into the wild. Bran followed. Hank paused on the threshold. "You're coming, right?" Clara whispered. His silhouette shook its head. "I stay. Slow him down. Someone has to." Tears threatened, but she swallowed them. "Thank you." was all she could manage. Hank squeezed her shoulder, pressed a folded note into her palm. Directions. And hope. Another beam sliced the clearing. Voices. Cabin's locked. Check inside. Hank slammed the hatch behind them, drew the bolt from outside. Clara crouched, listening to him shout in theatrically gruff protest. Private property! You got a warrant? The distraction worked. Footsteps retreated toward the front. Clara and Bran slipped into the dripping labyrinth of fern and fallen log. The creek glimmered pale ahead, guiding south. She unfolded Hank's note. Follow water 2 miles, cross at Split Rock, pick up Ranger Trail. Keep low. Sunrise behind you. H. She tucked it away, touched Bran's harness. Ready, soldier? He pressed his head to her knee, answer enough. They moved, 2 shadows stitched together by loyalty, vanishing into the pulse of rain and pine. Behind them, searchlights combed empty cabin walls, while Hank, the old soldier, stalled the new war with nothing but stubborn bones and a story no ledger could measure. Time was running out. But for the first time, they were running too, toward a dawn that hadn't yet decided what it would cost to keep a promise. The creek's song grew harsher as Clara and Bran followed its winding spine south, water frothing over shale, swollen with new rain. Somewhere behind them, searchlights swung through treetops like white blades, but distance and drizzle blurred their reach. The forest closed ranks, pine trunks thick as soldiers, undergrowth bristling with briar. Clara's lungs burned. Each breath tasted of wet bark. She kept one hand on Bran's harness, the other clutching Hank's note, disappearing into cedar gloom. Easy, Clara whispered. She found a gap where a post had rotted, pressed the top wire down with a stick, and eased one boot through. Bran ducked beside her, snout low. Then her calf brushed a barb. Pain flared, a sudden hot slash. She gasped, lost balance, and the stick slipped. The wire sprang up, raking her shin and slicing through fabric. She fell hard on the far side, hands sinking into moss. Rainwater stung the cut. Warmth blossomed down her sock. Bran whirled, his ears swept back, pupils blown wide. He nosed her calf, then her face, a sharp whine rising in his throat. "I'm okay," Clara tried, voice quivering more from shock than pain. But when she attempted to stand, dizziness swelled. The world wobbled gray at the edges. Blood soaked through denim, trickling into her boot. Bran licked the wound, tongue warm and rasping. Instinct, not comfort. Dogs clean injury to stave infection. Still, the rough tenderness broke something inside her. She brushed his ear. "Good boy. Just need—" Lightning cracked overhead. Thunder pealed seconds later, deep as cannon fire. Bran stiffened. His memories bared their teeth. For a breath he trembled, caught between flight and the old fight. Then his gaze snapped to Clara's pallid face. Choice. He pressed his head beneath her arm, nudging her torso until she collapsed, seated against a cedar trunk, leg elevated on a root, the position Hank had taught as bleedless. Bran planted himself beside her, flank firm at her hip. But Clara's breaths quickened, short, jittering. Panic rattled the edges. Hank is farther north. The search team's nearer. We'll never make the ranch. Rain needled through treetop gaps, cold on her fever-patched cheek. Bran lifted his head, nose tasting wind. Ears swiveled. Decision hardened in his stance. Drawing a lungful of night air, he threw back his muzzle and howled. The sound tore open the forest. Not a bark, not a fearful yelp, an ancient, resonant call that rolled through cedar halls and echoed down stony creek beds. Wolves once used that note to gather scattered pack. Soldiers heard it across desert lines and knew a friend was still alive. Clara's heart lurched. "Bran, quiet. They'll hear." He ignored her. He howled again, throat vibrating under her palm, long, unwavering, purposeful. Then he stopped, ears pinpointing north, and waited. Minutes stretched. Only rain answered. Clara squeezed his harness. Hank might be captured, or worse. A new sound threaded through the storm, low, rhythmic thumping. Footfalls? No. Boots striking soil with determined pace. A flashlight winked between trunks, its beam hooded, swiped from the Manor's first aid closet. Bran backed away, just enough to let Hank kneel. Clara tried to apologize, but the old man waved it off, slicing pant fabric with a penknife. "Barbed?" he muttered. "Clean slice, lucky." Sophia squatted, hands trembling as she unpacked gauze, iodine, butterfly strips. "Tyler's creating a diversion. He let the peacocks loose near the east terrace. Father's fuming." She flashed a shaky smile. "Buy us 20 minutes. Hank irrigated the cut with creek water laced with iodine. Clara winced. Bran nosed her shoulder, whined softly. Hank raised a brow. "Dog's reading your heart rate better than my pulse ox." He finished bandaging, tugged duct tape tight around the fabric. "You can stand?" Clara tested her leg. Pain flared, but the dizziness eased. She nodded. Hank scanned the dark. "Search grid shifted south. We double back west along the ridge, lose him in the limestone flats. Sophia, you head home, cover our tracks." Sophia hugged Clara fiercely. "Come back," she whispered, voice breaking. Clara squeezed her hand. "Keep father busy." They parted. Sophia vanished through vines. Hank hoisted the rucksack, slung an old rifle across his back, not for shooting, just for silhouette, he'd said. Rain eased to a drizzle. Clara rose, leaning on Bran. The dog matched her pace, body a living crutch. They began the climb toward the ridge, one step, another. Behind them, the howl lingered in Clara's ears, a promise carved from night air. You won't bleed alone. The first time Bran had broken silence for someone else, not out of fear, but of protection, a signal that the pack was larger than the wound. And in that fragile, blood-tinged moment, Clara knew they still had a chance, because fear, when shared, could turn to courage, louder than any liability ledger, any research grant, any barbed fence meant to keep hope hemmed in. Psalm. The Caldwell Gala was in full bloom, string quartet, lilting beneath chandeliers, waiters skimming champagne across a sea of sequins, when the first whisper threaded through the ballroom. The dog's gone. A footman carried the rumor like a cough from kitchen to corridor, and by the time it reached Mrs. Caldwell's pearl-lined ear, her smile cracked mid-conversation. She excused herself, found the head groundskeeper, and hissed, "Verify." The man returned minutes later, breathless. "Empty kennel, ma'am. Gate wire cut." She paled. Guests swirled around her like perfume, but she smelled liability. She smelled headlines. She hurried to find her husband. Clara would have recognized deductible thresholds, negligence clauses. Caldwell ignored him. In a security office, monitors flickered, grainy night vision feeds of hedgerows, stables, kennels. Bran's enclosure showed only rain-slick concrete. Clara's cottage camera revealed a darkened doorway, boots gone from the step. She's with him, Caldwell muttered. Not anger, something deeper. Betrayal, laced with fear. Myers adjusted his glasses. We should alert Brookhaven. Cargo may be compromised. Forget Brookhaven. Caldwell grabbed the radio. Unit 1, sweep North Orchard. Unit 2, check Forest Trail. Report any sign. He dialed another line. Sheriff Dalton, Richard Caldwell, need deputies. Possible animal escape. Minor may be involved. A pause. Yes, dangerous. Armed if necessary. His throat bobbed after the last word. Tyler burst into the doorway, raincoat dripping. Father, those searchlights? They're scaring Samantha. Caldwell's eyes flicked to the monitors. One showed nurses calming his youngest daughter, her small body trembling. Then find your sister, he snapped. Stay with her. Tyler hesitated. It's not Bran you should be afraid of. Caldwell's gaze hardened. Go. Tyler left. Anger and worry knotted behind his shoulders. Myers leaned in. Sheriff will want a statement. We spin this as a rogue animal. Caldwell cut him off. Draft what you must, but that dog comes back alive. Understood? Myers blinked at the unspoken or else, then nodded and vanished down the hall. Outside, rain drummed faintly as the state vehicles roared to life. 2 black SUVs, a quad, 3 men on foot with thermal scopes. They fanned into the orchard, flashlights combing leaf-littered lanes. One guard found the bolt-cut wire. Another discovered fresh prints, small boots, large paws. Heading south, radio crackled. Toward Creek Line. Sheriff Dalton's cruisers arrived, blue strobes slicing mist. Deputies strapped on canine vests. Irony lost on no one. Caldwell met the sheriff beneath an iron archway. Explained, rogue combat dog. Downplayed Clara's role. Likely frightened, hiding nearby. Dalton wasn't fooled. Your boy Tyler told my deputy the kid took the dog on purpose. Caldwell's jaw flexed. Find her. Dalton tipped his hat. We will. But if that animal lunges... Caldwell walked away before he finished. Sophia watched from an upstairs window, heart jackhammering. Searchlights painted the orchard silver. She texted Clara. Teams everywhere. Dad called sheriff. Hurry. The bubble remained unresolved. No service in the canyon woods. Down the hall, Samantha whimpered. Sophia pocketed her leaned into her, trusting. In the security room, Caldwell replayed orchard footage, frame by frame. Bran at heel, Clara whispering into his fur, Sophia clapping, Tyler's reluctant awe. Something sacred. He'd felt it then. Yet, here he was, ordering men with rifles into his woods. A guard's voice crackled over radio. Found footprints, adolescent female, blood drops, looks recent. Caldwell's breath hitched. Send a medic team, now. He turned, but the room was empty. His reflection stared back in the dark monitor, a man measuring cost against consequence, and finding neither held their weight tonight. He pulled on a raincoat, left the mansion's safe glow, and stepped into night, toward the search he'd ordered, toward a child and a dog, and a decision too long postponed. Above the orchard, clouds shuddered with distant thunder. Suspense coiled through the trees like a live wire, every snapped twig a warning, every flashlight beam a question. Time was sprinting, toward dawn, toward Brookhaven, toward something Caldwell couldn't yet name. And in the hush before the next gust of wind, he found himself praying, not to keep the dog contained, but to bring his daughter home with her tiny, fragile faith unbroken. The pale gray of dawn was breaking when Clara felt her phone vibrate through Hank's waterproof map case. No bars for hours, but one message had slipped through. "Susanna down, help!" Sent from Sophia. No location, no context, just those 4 words trembling on the screen. Clara swayed. Hank steadied her. "What is it, kid?" "Susanna," she choked out. She collapsed. Bran, the German shepherd at her side, perked up. He knew the name, 6-year-old Susanna, the child with lavender shampoo and seizures that stole her voice. He remembered. Clara had seen it once, the blank stare, blue lips. So had Bran. He'd sensed it, even before Sophia had fetched help. Now Clara knelt in damp leaves, pressing her forehead to Bran's harness. "We have to go back." Hank didn't argue. "Cut straight north. Old logging road, less patrol." She rose, pain flashing through her gashed leg, but adrenaline drowned it. Bran fell into step, taut with purpose. Mist clung low as they pushed through the forest, morning light bleeding peach across wet fern and cedar. When the Caldwell Manor came into view, the tents sagged like empty lungs. A deputy's SUV idled nearby, Hank locked, body tense. He turned left, unprompted, toward the living room. There, on the Persian rug, lay Susanna, pale, unmoving. Victoria Caldwell knelt beside her, napkin beneath her head. Sophia hovered. Mr. Caldwell barked into a phone. A guard stood nearby, useless. And then Bran moved, fast and silent. He leapt over the couch, landed beside Susanna, pressed his nose gently to her cheek. He whined, then barked once sharp. Victoria startled. The guard reached for his weapon. "Stand down," Caldwell shouted. Bran sniffed, mapped her body, then braced himself behind her back, forming a living wedge. He howled, short and deep, not warning, but command. "Help her, now." Clara stepped into view. "He's alerting," she said, breathless. All eyes turned to her. "She needs to be on her side," she said, kneeling opposite Victoria. "Bran will keep her airway clear." Victoria hesitated, then obeyed. Bran shifted with perfect control. Susanna twitched. Then color began to return to her cheeks. Sirens wailed up the drive. "She led me here," Clara said softly, as medics flooded the room. "But he's the one who found her." A paramedic eyed Bran warily. "Control your animal." "He's working," Clara said. The medic nodded. Only after Susanna was loaded onto the stretcher did Bran relax. He walked back to Clara and pressed his forehead against her chest. Mr. Caldwell approached, stripped of command. "You brought him back." "No," Clara whispered. "He brought me." He knelt. First time Clara had seen him beneath his own pride. He reached to touch Bran's shoulder. The dog allowed it. Victoria's voice cracked. "He saved her, again." Caldwell stood, turned to the head of security. "Cancel the transfer. Call off the deputies." "Sir, Brookhaven." "No," Caldwell said firmly. "No more. He stays." He looked at Clara. "Will you teach us? Him and me both?" Clara nodded, eyes full. Bran thumped his tail once, quiet approval of a new bond. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and prayer. Outside room 3, Clara sat on a plastic chair. Bran curled at her feet. Through the glass, Susanna lay amid wires and soft beeps. Victoria hovered close, mascara smudged. Mr. Caldwell stood still as stone. Dr. Mera, the on-call neurologist, arrived. "It was a focal impaired awareness seizure," she explained. "No convulsions, but her vitals dipped. She's stable now. We'll adjust medication." Victoria collapsed into a chair. "I was pouring coffee. I didn't hear anything. If Bran hadn't—" Caldwell's eyes fell on the shepherd. "When did you train him for this?" Clara met his gaze. "We didn't. He was trained years ago, military K9. I just reminded him." Caldwell frowned. "Military?" Meyer's file said guard dog. That file was wrong.
Clara crouched, palm extended. Bran sniffed, calm.
Some dogs smell chemical changes before a seizure. He's accurate. I recommend official certification. Caldwell looked dazed. How did he know what none of us did? Because he listens, Clara said softly, to what we've forgotten to hear. Victoria wiped tears. He's not a threat. He's a guardian. Caldwell turned to Clara. You risked a lot to bring him back. I risked less than what he gave to her. He looked through the window at Susanna, breathing, steady, alive, and then he said it. He stays. Victoria gripped Clara's hand. Thank you for hearing him when we wouldn't. 3 days later, the manor was quiet. Susanna had returned home, color brighter, breath easier. Bran now slept in the sunroom, the orchid trays replaced with a blanket and a clear view of the lawn. Upstairs, Caldwell entered his office, briefcase in hand. Myers followed, drained. He placed an old folder on the desk, faded green, stamped, Department of Defense. Bran was never a breeder dog, Myers said. He was military. Canine Branch, Unit 14. Specialty, Seizure Alert, Tactical Tracking. Inside the folder, a laminated ID card, a faded photo of Bran in uniform, a handler's arm around his neck. Caldwell's breath hitched. The word Seizure Alert gleamed like truth reclaimed. He never forgot, Caldwell whispered. Downstairs, Clara sat on the carpet, Bran at her side, scribbling into a notebook. Bran's language manual. Notes on ear flicks, tail gestures, posture. Bran occasionally placed a paw on the page, smudging like co-authorship. Caldwell appeared at the door. May I? She nodded. Bran lifted his head. He knelt, handed her the file. We found this. His voice lowered. They buried it. Said he was dangerous. He was just wounded, Clara said. But he never stopped trying. Sophia entered with Susanna, cheeks pink, blanket in hand. The child toddled over and pressed her palm to Bran's nose. He nudged her gently, tail wagging. Clara saw moisture in Caldwell's eyes. Victoria followed, surprising Clara with a mug of cocoa. You were never just the help, she whispered. You were the hinge this house needed. Hank arrived too, cap in hand. You owe that dog, he said. Caldwell gave a soft smile. We repay him with purpose. He turned to Clara. Dr. Mera is certifying him. I want you here. Permanent, full scholarship for vet school, if you still want it. Tears blurred Clara's eyes. Trust. Outside, the wind rattled pecan trees. Inside, recognition bloomed. Of a mission never forgotten. A dog's loyalty never revoked. Bran had never stopped guarding. All he'd needed was someone to remember the language he still spoke and a small girl who believed in him first. Morning split the Caldwell estate in two. Upstairs, suits and spreadsheets filled the study, where advisors debated the Brookhaven contract, millions in research funding, exclusive data rights, and a clause that demanded Bran be surrendered. No return. Downstairs, sunlight spilled into the newly dubbed family room. Toys scattered on windowsills. Scratches marked the floor, where Bran had already begun to live. Clara and Susanna sat cross-legged, feeding him apple slices. Sophia paced, gripping a folder labeled Healing Tales Canine Therapy Proposal. 2 rooms, 1 house, 1 decision. We must consider optics, said Randall Myers, voice smooth as varnish. Brookhaven's payout offsets losses. Their contract has structure. But it takes him. Richard Caldwell muttered. They retire dogs in 5 years. That's generous, another advisor added. Richard said nothing. In his mind, Bran's amber eyes followed Susanna's breath. His body curled around her blanket. Downstairs, Susanna stood. We take Bran upstairs, she said softly. Clara hesitated. Your father? I need him, the girl replied. Sophia exhaled. Then let's crash the boardroom. The elevator opened on the executive floor. Sophia led, Clara and Bran beside her, Susanna between them. A guard moved to stop them. Family business, Sophia said firmly. Inside the boardroom, Myers froze mid-pitch as the door opened. Advisors stiffened at the sight. Sophia poised, Susanna pale but determined, Clara limping but unbroken, and Bran steady at her side. Sophia dropped the Healing Tales folder onto the conference table. Add us to the agenda. Susanna climbed into the empty chair beside her father. Bran settled beneath her feet. Sophia opened the folder. 12-week therapy certification, 1/10 Brookhaven's cost, return Susanna's life. Emotion doesn't balance ledgers, Myers scoffed. Susanna's voice cut through. Ledgers don't save me when I fall. Silence rippled. Clara stepped forward. Brookhaven tests fear reflexes. Bran will fail. He'll be labeled dangerous and euthanized. But therapy work builds on what he already does, what you've seen. She met Richard's eyes. Sometimes value is the breath that never becomes a seizure. Because someone listened. Myers interjected, "Cat, please, Daddy." Emotion rose in Richard's throat. He cleared it. "Advisors out," he said quietly. Myers protested. A hand raised. Silence. Once the room emptied, Richard looked at his family. Prophet gave us comfort, but comfort didn't lift Susanna off that rug. He signed the Healing Tales proposal. Relief crashed through Clara. Sophia let out a ragged breath. Tyler clapped Bran's shoulder. From the door, Victoria entered quietly. When profit and protection conflict, she said, choose the one that lets you sleep. Richard turned to Clara. Can you guide us? First lesson? Clara smiled. Trust starts on the floor. She sat cross-legged. Bran followed. Susanna giggled and copied. One by one the others joined, Victoria, Tyler, even Richard, sitting on the rug in a loose circle. No boardroom formality, just family. And a dog who sighed as if he'd just filed the final report of his mission. Evening brought fireflies. The family gathered in the sunroom, Clara jotting training notes, Sophia flipping through veterinary guides, Victoria reading quietly. Richard stood by the mantel watching the sky bleed pink. The screen door creaked. Hank entered, hat in hand, boots still muddy from patching the creek fence. Just came to check the patient, he said, voice gravel soft. Victoria offered him iced tea. Stay, join us for supper. He shook his head. Got words to say before I lose the grit. Everyone turned to listen. I've heard a lot of talk lately, Hank said, eyes on Richard. Brookhaven, ROI, reminds me of Nam, how politicians measured victory in body counts. He gestured toward Bran. That dog carries memory the way soldiers carry shrapnel, buried deep till it aches. Diego Morales wasn't his owner. He was his brother. Clara's throat tightened. I knew a handler named Miller. His dog took shrapnel in a mortar blast. Miller stayed behind to hold that dog while medics worked the men. Got chewed out for misplaced priorities. Said, that dog pulled 3 Marines from a minefield last week. Ain't no ledger tall enough to measure that. Silence followed. The grandfather clock ticked. Hank looked Richard dead in the eye. If you can't see the soldier in that dog, sir, maybe the war's not over for you either. The words hit hard. Richard stared at Bran curled beside Susanna, at Clara calm and watchful, at Sophia's quiet fire. Susanna looked up. "Soldiers keep people safe," she said shyly. Hank smiled. "Yes, they do." Richard reached for Victoria's hand. "I've spent my life fighting the enemies I could see, markets, loss, risk, but the one that almost took our daughter—" His voice cracked. "I never saw that coming." Ghosts chatter at night, a hand to remind him he's home. Sophia wiped tears. Tyler nodded. Clara sat straighter. Hank nodded toward Clara. "She speaks his language, but a soldier trusts the whole platoon. You've got to learn it too." Richard stepped forward. Bran looked up. Richard exhaled slowly. Bran sniffed, then gently placed a paw on his knee. Susanna giggled, hugging both. A triangle formed: grief, trust, and promise. Hank stood, tipping his hat. "That's lesson 1. "Stay," Richard said. "Break bread with us. A soldier shouldn't eat alone." Hank hesitated, then took the offered hand. Calloused palm meeting calloused palm. "I reckon I'm partial to cornbread," he rasped. Laughter rose, fragile, then full. Bran's tail thumped. The family moved toward dinner. Clara lingered, gazing at the sunroom where Hank's words still floated. War leaves ghosts, but loyalty remains. 2 weeks later, a white van rolled up the gravel drive, not from Brookhaven, but from Healing Tales Canine Therapy. Painted on the side, a paw print and the words, "Hope in Training." Bran sat on the porch beside Clara, wearing his new blue vest like armor remade. Susanna stood proudly beside him, a glittering star sticker pressed to his ID tag. "So he always knows he's our hero," she whispered. The van door opened. Dr. Martin Kelly stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Morning, soldiers," he knelt. "Ready to train again, Bran?" Bran chuffed softly, tail sweeping once. The whole family gathered: Richard, Victoria, Sophia, Tyler, and Hank. Not in suits, just shirt sleeves and soft clothes, hands full of parting gifts. Susanna handed over her drawing of Bran battling cartoon lightning bolts, Tyler's paracord leash, Sophia's laminated cue cards, Hank's old dog whistle, Rex's whistle, now polished and hung on a leather lanyard. "We labeled meds," Victoria said. Clara typed his cues. Dr. Kelly nodded. "We've never had a more prepared trainee." He turned to Clara. "Also apprenticeship offer. Junior handler track. Tuition waived. Saturdays and school breaks." Clara froze. Susanna squeezed her hand. "You can visit Bran every week." Richard nodded. "If you want it, sign it. Your mom's already on board." Clara blinked back tears. "Thank you." Kelly clipped the lead to Bran's vest. The dog turned to look at each face, cataloging his family. Clara knelt, forehead pressed to his. "Show them what you showed me," she whispered, tucking a new red scarf into his collar. "Bring this back when you graduate." Bran raised his paw. "Ready." They stepped inside. Sunlight spilled through the doorway behind them, laying a bright path toward a center filled with healing, purpose, and second chances. Inside the office once ruled by prophets, Clara signed her name, Clara Bell, handler trainee. Ink dried with weight, not just contract but commitment to listen beyond the noise, to lead with loyalty, to believe in dogs the world tried to forget. She pictured Bran walking into his next chapter, red scarf fluttering, mission clear. And one day soon, he'd return, not as property, but protector, not rescued, but home. Dawn spread over the Caldwell estate like a gentle drum roll, more ceremonial than waking. Fog blurred the lawn's edges, and Clara stood beside Bran's old kennel with a cardboard box pressed to her hip. She almost hoped it would drizzle. Goodbyes always sounded softer under gray, but the sky held stubbornly blue. The kennel door hung open. Bran hadn't slept there since the night Susanna collapsed. Yet this was where Clara wanted their farewell. She knelt and set the box down. Inside, his favorite Kong, grooming brush, 2 blankets from the sunroom, and a scrap of red scarf stitched into one corner, a signal to the new trainers that this worn piece of fabric mattered more than it looked. From above, the willow tree sighed, its leaves beginning to yellow. One drifted into Clara's lap. Another landed gently on Bran's back as he padded toward her, vest already fastened, tail waving calm assurance. She picked up both leaves, tucked them into her notebook. Clara knelt one last time. 12 weeks, she whispered. Don't show off till week 3. Let them fall in love gradually. Her voice cracked, half laugh, half break. Bran pressed his head to her knee, still and grounding. Leaves swirled around them again. One settled on his back. He didn't move. I'll visit Saturdays, she said. Susanna, too, once cleared. Bran's tail thumped once. Message received. The Caldwells arrived. Sophia placed a family photo in Bran's pouch. Tyler gave a green rope toy. Victoria handed Clara a leather-bound logbook labeled Service Log. Bran and Clara, and Richard, slightly awkward, slipped Hank's whistle over her neck. You'll know when to use it, he murmured. Last came Hank, thermos in one hand, a willow branch cane in the other. From that old sentinel, he leaned it gently against the van step, so Bran can plant roots wherever he lands. Clara cupped Bran's face, forehead to his. Go make them see both the soldier and the gentle heart. He exhaled once, warm against her palms, then stepped into the van on his own, turned and lay down, head between paws, eyes steady. No bark, no whine, only quiet presence as the van pulled away, his silhouette visible until a curve of mist swallowed him whole. As the vehicle vanished, the willow shook loose a final flurry of golden leaves. They fell on Clara's shoulders and into her hands. She tucked several into her chest pocket. Sophia joined her silently. Packing day, she said, but not unpacking heart. Clara nodded, voice soft. He'll bring it back full. Behind them, the willow stilled as if satisfied the ritual was complete. That afternoon, Clara sat behind the Healing Tales Center, cross-legged in grass, Bran lying beside her, alert, calm, unsleeping. His collar was new, stitched in white, Bran, but it felt too clean, too blank. She pulled a worn ribbon from her notebook. It had once marked rain-washed paw prints. It had weathered storms, tears, zippers, and silence. She tied it to the brass ring of his collar. So they'll know, she whispered, that you already belong somewhere. Bran rested his chin against her boot, quiet and warm. It's not just a ribbon, Clara said. It's proof that you weren't just found. You were chosen, and you chose back. The center gate creaked. A staff boy peeked out, then respectfully retreated. Everyone had learned quickly. With Bran, space wasn't absence. It was reverence. Wind tugged Clara's braid, ruffled Bran's coat. A leaf skipped across the grass, caught on his paw. He didn't move. She remembered what Hank had said. Mark him in a way only hearts can read. That was what this was. Not a tag, not a trophy. A memory knotted in silence. A whisper between souls. A flock of birds startled from the trees. Bran stood, not braced, not tense, just present. Clara rose too. The ribbon fluttered slightly, like a wave from yesterday to tomorrow. She placed her hand over it. Wherever you go, she said, this will speak when no one else can. Bran stepped forward into the center's shade. At the threshold he paused, not for permission, for remembrance. Then he entered, the door eased closed behind him, and the red ribbon moved with him, silent as breath, strong as memory. The letter came on a Thursday, ordinary envelope, tucked between flyers and seed catalogs, but the return address, Healing Tales, Larkspur Drive. Clara froze, standing on the gravel path. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she walked to the porch, past the boots she hadn't worn since Bran left, past the swing that still creaked with the north wind. She sat on the top step, envelope pressed to her heart. Her pulse beat hard against it. Ash, the neighbor's golden mutt, padded over. Clara handed him a biscuit. Her eyes never left the letter. Only when shadows stretched long across the yard did she tear it open. The paper was crisp, formal, but kind. At the top, Healing Tales emblem, child and dog beneath a tree. She began to read. We are delighted to inform you that Bran, ID #K9-2245, has successfully completed his first phase of therapeutic reconditioning and passed his basic certification evaluation as a prospective seizure alert companion. He demonstrated calm under pressure, responsive alerting behavior, and non-aggression in all simulations. Effective next month, Bran will begin supervised transition with a placement family. His match is a 7-year-old boy named Elijah, recently diagnosed with focal epilepsy. As part of our new Legacy Partnership program, Bran's official profile now includes the following annotation. Previous handler, Clara Bell. Clara blinked. The ink wavered. She read it again. Previous handler, Clara Bell. Not volunteer. Not intake contact. Not temporary foster. Handler. A word she never asked for, but always carried in her soul. Tears welled, uninvited but right. One drop landed on the page, over Bran's name, soaking in like rain into dry earth. Ash nudged her. She scratched his ear absently, vision blurring. Bran had passed. Not just tests, but memory, trust. He had crossed a line that so many thought him incapable of. She pictured him lying beside a child's bed, alert and still. Maybe he shifted weight. Maybe he blinked. Maybe he simply breathed with intention. And someone had seen it, noted it, known. That's a signal. That's experience. That's love, retaught through ritual. And someone else, someone at Healing Tales, had written it down. Previous handler, Clara Bell. She folded the letter, pressed its crease smooth, and slipped it into the inside pocket of her jacket, the one she wore the first day she entered the kennel alone. She reached beside her for the red ribbon, now soft and rust-colored, still tied to the porch rail. She hadn't cut it, and now she never would. The wind stirred the trees. The willow near the house rustled, trailing branches low. Somewhere a dog barked, sharp, steady. Clara didn't flinch. She looked up at the stars, beginning to flicker against twilight. "He's doing it, Mama," she whispered. "He really is." Quietly, in that one line. Previous handler, Clara Bell. She leaned into the porch column. For the first time in weeks, rest didn't feel like surrender. It felt like trust. Somewhere, maybe 100 miles away, a boy named Elijah would sleep safer that night, because a soldier remembered his post. And a girl with a ribbon had remembered his name. It was the kind of morning that arrived without announcement, just a soft breath of gold through the trees, settling on the porch like an old friend. The wind was still. Clara's coffee had gone cold in her hand, untouched, because she saw them. Below the porch steps, where gravel met pine needles, were 4 paw prints. deep, splayed just enough to speak of weight and memory. Not fresh, not old, but unmistakably Bran's. Not ashes, not the neighbor's barn dog. These were pressed in with purpose, like each step had carried a message. I was here. I remember. Clara slowly lowered the mug and knelt beside them. She didn't touch the prints. Some things lose meaning if handled. A breeze rustled the trees, scattering leaves across the yard. But one thing didn't move. A curled strip of pine bark nestled at the base of the stairpost, right where Bran used to sit, back pressed against the wood, sentinel of the dawn. Then came the scent. Dust, cedar, sun-warmed fur, and that metallic trace she could never name, but always knew. It clung to the porch rail like a quiet note. You didn't imagine me. I came back. She closed her eyes. He had been there, not as hope, not as memory, as presence. She pictured him arriving in the blue hour, silent, deliberate. No circling, no bark, just stillness beneath the window. One moment to listen, to make sure she was okay. Then, gone again. A leaf brushed her cheek. Clara sat on the step, the one he used to nudge her from, and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't call healing tales, didn't check trail cams, didn't trace the tracks. Because this wasn't a trail. It was a gesture, a loop closed, a whisper from a heart that still knew its way home. From her jacket pocket, Clara pulled the red ribbon, the same one once tied to Bran's collar. She fastened it back onto the porch rail, let it wave in the morning breeze, a flag for things drizzle when she saw the truck in the drive. Mr. Hank's old Ford, dented, familiar, and in the back a crate, wooden slats, wire frame. Inside, 2 oversized ears, one lopsided, the other upright, a black nose pressed to mesh. 2 amber eyes blinked at her. Clara froze. Mr. Hank met her at the porch, hat in hand. "She's not Bran," he said gently. "I know," Clara whispered, but her heart fluttered like a paper kite caught in wind. "She needed a place," he continued. "Shelter out east's too crowded, loud, not much room for healing." Clara approached the crate. The pup inside was small, legs too long, fur damp from nervous panting, but her gaze didn't flinch. It waited, like Bran's had, that first day, not asking to be rescued, just waiting to see who might try. "What's her name?" Clara asked. "Doesn't have one. Thought maybe you'd know." Clara knelt, her fingers resting, not pressing, against the mesh. The pup tilted her head. Clara smiled, something warm unfurling. "Raya," she said. "It means hope." Hank nodded. "Good name." They carried the crate to the porch. The pup didn't whine, didn't bark, just stayed, nose pressed to the bars, watching Clara with that same alert stillness. "Bran would have liked her," Hank said, voice low. Clara watched the pup's steady breath. "I think," she whispered, "he already does." Rain began again, soft, steady. Not the kind that scatters, the kind that draws things in close. Clara opened the crate door. The pup didn't bolt. She stepped out slowly. Each paw touched the porch with the hush of permission. Then she sat, not by Hank, not under the bench, but in front of Clara. Her tail flicked once. A breath. Another. Then, gently, she lifted one paw and placed it on Clara's boot. Clara's eyes stung. She didn't scoop the pup up, didn't smother her in praise. She let her fingers hover, offering, waiting, just like Hank had taught her. Raya leaned in. A soft weight pressed into Clara's palm. That was enough. The porch, once a space of memory, had become one of beginning. A pup named for hope, a girl fluent in the language of patience, and the silent legacy of a dog whose prints still lived in the earth, not haunting, but guarding. "You know," Hank murmured, "dogs like her, they don't come by accident. You think Bran sent her?" Hank looked toward the hills. No.
Lay beside her, ears still undecided, head tilted as if listening before the words began. She was growing, slowly, stubbornly. Clara liked that. Slow things stayed longer. Above them a red ribbon fluttered, tied to a low branch weeks ago, the same ribbon Bran once wore. She'd never explained it, no one asked. Some things speak only to those who stay long enough to understand them. Clara began to read. Once upon a time, in a forest full of quiet paths and loud leaves, there lived a dog who listened more than he barked. Raya shifted, chin landing gently on Clara's ankle. He wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but he knew where the lost things went. He knew when the rain was coming, and he knew how to wait, even when it hurt. The wind carried the scent of late summer, apples not yet ripe, creek water low and singing. It tugged at the ribbon, lifting it slightly, then twisting once in the air. Clara paused. For a breath too long the ribbon hovered, suspended like a nod. Then it settled back, ends quiet again. Raya's tail tapped the earth once. Clara didn't speak, didn't cry. She rested a hand on the pup's back, fingers threading gently through fur still unsure of its final color. And there it was, that fullness in her chest, not grief, not joy, just full. She closed the book, not because the story was over, but because the moment didn't need more words. The willow's branches swayed like an old lullaby. Light filtered through, catching strands of Clara's hair, the amber in Raya's eyes, the red of a ribbon frayed by time, but still strong enough to remember. She leaned back against the tree, shoulder pressing into bark worn smooth by seasons. Raya yawned, stood, circled once, then curled beside Clara. Not the same shape as Bran, but something in the closeness felt like carrying forward, not replacing. Never replacing. Just continuing. Clara looked down at the pup. "You're not him," she whispered. Raya didn't stir. "But you're here, and so am I." In the distance, someone chopped wood. A bird called. A truck passed somewhere far off. Life went on. But here in the hush beneath the willow, there was stillness, sacred, unbroken. Clara reached up and tied a second ribbon, a thinner one, newer, sky blue, just below the red. "For the one who came," she said softly, "and the one who stayed." The ribbons twisted together gently in the breeze. Not goodbye, not holding on, just remembering. Sometimes the quietest moments, a paw on your knee, a nudge at the door, a breath beside your bed, speak the loudest about love. Stories like Bran and Clara's remind us that loyalty isn't loud, and healing often comes on four legs, with eyes that see through what words can't touch. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and them feel more secure, there's a gentle resource I came across not long ago. It's not flashy or filled with jargon, just simple guidance from folks who care deeply about dogs and the people who love them.
I'll leave the link here, quietly, in case it calls to you the way a familiar paw print might. Not a must, just a path, if you're looking for one. Thank you for being here, for caring, and for believing, like I do, that some of the best souls we meet in this life come with fur, patience, and a story of their own.